Hi there, and welcome to the Skylight Books author reading series. If you'd like to learn more about us and our many upcoming author events, please visit skylightbooks.com, where you can browse our inventory, buy books, and join our Friends with Benefits Club. You can also follow us on Twitter, Tumblr, and Facebook. To speak to a real live bookseller like me, please call 323-660-1175. Thanks for your support, and enjoy.
Steph Cha is the author of Follow Her Home, Beware, Beware, Dead Soon Enough, and Your House Will Pay. She's the noir editor for the Los Angeles Review of Books and a regular contributor to the Los Angeles Times and USA Today. She lives in her native city of Los Angeles with her husband and 2 basset hounds. Tom Lutz is the author of several books, including And the Monkey Learned Nothing, Drinking Mare's Milk on the Roof of the World, and Crying. His work has been translated into a dozen languages and named among the New York Times notable books. His book, Doing Nothing, won the American Book Award. He is the founding editor of the Los Angeles Review of Books. Born Slippy is his first novel. Please give Tom Lutz and Steph Cha a warm Skylight welcome.
Thank you. Thank you all for coming. Wow. This is so nice. You always assume nobody's going to show up, so it's really great when people do. I'm going to read. I had a really hard time figuring out what part of this to read, and because it's all so good, and part of it is because one of the 2 main characters is really he's not safe for work, and he's not PG at all. In fact, it's okay. Is it? Yeah. Okay. All right. In that case, all right. I was gonna do a quick change there, but as long as Mom says it's okay. There is a scene that I practiced reading that I thought I would read that has in which this fellow, his name is Dmitry, is regaling a man and his 13-year-old daughter. And part of the excruciating nature of those 10 pages is that you're always hearing this through the ears of the 13-year-old daughter. So I didn't want to really do that to an actual 13-year-old daughter. But what I'm going to read is, the novel is about Frank and Dmitry. And Frank is a 28-year-old, kind of a loser, handyman in Western Massachusetts. Dmitry is the son of friends. He's coming through the U.S. before he goes on to university, which Frank is a little jealous of. Frank's an autodidact, but kind of got a big chip on his shoulder about being inferior to everybody, and not really worried about that. Frank has a chance. He's building a big house in Connecticut, and he and the guy who's building it with are kind of ripping off the state of Connecticut in order to do it. But it's his big break. He's going to now kind of have a real life, and Dmitry kind of screws that up in a number of ways, some of which you know about at the point where I'm going to pick this up, and some of which we don't know about yet, because it keeps moving back and forth from the year 2000 when they meet and they work together on this building site and live together in a tent on the building site. And over the years, Dmitry keeps coming back. Frank at one point thinks it's like he's offshored his conscience. And he keeps coming back to get lectured at by Frank for reasons that aren't entirely clear. But this is the first time Dmitry is back in the U.S. After going off to college. All right. If you had asked Frank at the end of that long summer if he'd ever see Dmitry again, he would have said absolutely not. Dmitry had proven himself not just a lousy worker and a horrible slob, but a full-out criminal. And he had fucked over Frank in a half-dozen ways. And, well, long story short, Dmitry is back in England, so chances were slim to none they'd run into each other. Frank had never been west of Pennsylvania or east of Rhode Island, so how would he end up in England? When they finished the house in Connecticut, Paul and Margie, Paul is the guy that he's in cahoots with, but Paul and Margie moved into it instead of selling it. And that was Dmitry's fault too. He had completely tanked Frank's relationship with Paul, everyone's relationship with everyone, and by the time he left, all was fucked, and Paul wasn't about to be reminded of the debacle every day by working with Frank. Paul's excuse was that his wife had forced his hand, made him keep the house because she fell in love with it, and of course she fell in love with it, since it was tricked out with the best plumbing fixtures and surfaces money could buy, expensive tile, overpriced cabinets, the latest granite countertops, more bathrooms than a family could ever use. Paul never paid him anything, the scumbag, beyond the starvation wages he charged to their joint venture to feed Frank's busted family and keep him in American cheese sandwiches for 5 months. When Frank ran the numbers, he ended up with a considerably lower hourly rate than he paid Dmitry. He knew that Paul was angry with him and that he blamed him for Dmitry's various crimes, and that it gave Paul a certain amount of satisfaction to screw him out of his half. Frank walked away with a pile of credit card debt, and Paul walked away with a house worth $1 million. And Paul was mad at Frank. Chief John Ross had it right, Frank thought. We never forgive our victims. He did see Dmitry again, though, just 2 years later. Frank was on an upswing, his business improving. The house he built for Paul was beautiful, and it got him other jobs. For those, he had the lawyer do the contracts and had everything spelled out. And the one housing sector that didn't freeze up after 9/11 was the high-end stuff like he was doing. He made decent money. It wasn't the big money he hoped to make with Paul, but he could see a path to eventually getting there without him. Before Dmitry's junior year at university, as he said it, and are there any English people in the audience? I apologize for what's going to happen for the rest of the evening. I'm going to do this terrible English accent that, may sound English to you, but I doubt it, but I'm hoping will sound English to other people. But I can't hear him speak without the accent, I'm afraid. I've tried reading it without it, and it just doesn't work, so fair warning, I guess. He came back to the States, Dmitry, that summer to take the Green Tortoise, a hippie alternative to Greyhound, a $2 hostel on wheels across the country. Frank knew he should still be pissed at Dmitry, but the pain of the various betrayals was dimmed by time and prosperity. Everything had already changed so much. Only 2 years, but they were long ones. He never forgave, Frank thought to himself, but he always seemed to forget. Over time, he found himself remembering the good parts, his sense of being an intellectual mentor and moral conscience, not the bad. He did the same with Tracy, too. Tracy is his ex. Only remembering the upside. Maybe that's the way people were. Maybe that's why we put up with each other. The Green Tortoise, Frank said, and it sounded a bit derisive as they walked into the kitchen of his apartment in Avon. Don't be such a snob, Frankie, Dmitry said, throwing his duffel bag on the floor. I am not a snob. Well, for a non-snob, you do quote quite a few glitzy writers, he said, looking around the apartment. This is a step up from the old tent, eh, Frankie, my boy? Yeah, really, Frank said. No thanks to fucking Paul in either case. Well, Dmitry said, opening the refrigerator and grabbing a beer, handing Frank one. Let's not go there right this moment. He meant let's not talk about it ever. Anyways, he said in his American accent, do you realize how expensive prostitutes are in the United States of America, Frankie? It turns out that in those 4 days when Mattie and her 2 friends from the Green Tortoise were living in the land yacht, and let's not talk about that right this minute either, I did the math and I had roughly $8,000 US worth of sex. Her 2 friends. I didn't tell you about them? Well, I suppose we didn't talk about much of this, did we? Sally was a waitress from Jamestown, New York, and was a tiny girl, but had the most ridiculous, really quite large, really quite exorbitant knockers, hard as boulders. She must have been 5 feet tall at most, and she had a breathtakingly minuscule vagina. I could barely get a finger in it, much less my cock, although Lord knows I tried. Mary was the opposite, a really tall girl, and it was all in the legs, the longest legs I've ever seen in my life. In my memory, Frankie, even though I know rationally this can't be true, You see, it's really tricky to read this shit. And they see, it's really stuff that's better consumed in private. But, and they seem to each be 3 feet long or more. Is that even possible? Ah, God, I don't miss this kind of talk, Frank thought. Don't miss it at all. Margie was right. He's really just a swine. Frank caught Dmitry looking at his nauseated face, and he seemed to actually enjoy it. Can I borrow this? Dmitry said as he grabbed a tape measure from the tool belt hanging on a hook near the kitchen door. Just like old days. I never could remember where I put mine down, could I? So let's say she was the same length to the knee as me, about 2 feet, and the same from the belt to the top of the head. He held the tape measure so that it ran over his nose to his belt, or about 2'8". If she had a 3-foot thigh, she would be 7 feet 8 inches tall, which she definitely was not. The 3 feet thigh is an aberration of my memory, what T.S. Eliot called an objective correlative, right? No, that's not what it means, Frank said. But then he thought, well, maybe. He wasn't sure. We had several days of what was for me an absolute paradise, with everyone pretending nothing was happening, the girls all very lovey-dovey with each other, everything very discreet, and me as happy as a man can be, the Neapolitan ice cream of sex every day. Except that, as I found out, not everyone was pretending. Mary didn't, as it turns out, know that I was boffing Sally and Maddie as well, nor did Sally know, and so when it all was uncovered, so to speak, there seemed a great wailing and grinding, rending of garments and gnashing of teeth, a lot of great make-up sex, until Mary and Sally found I was having make-up sex with both of them. Maddie was the imperturbable cucumber she always was, but essentially we had to drop off the other two at a bus station. And the point of all this is, I think it should be obvious, Frankie. I developed an idea about the kind of women who ride the green tortoise, based on a quite delectable sample, and if history repeats itself, which we know it does, the entire trip will be effectively free. You had to come here for this? There are no women in England? Well, Frankie, I found that unlike in their home environment, women, when traveling, are much more like men, ready to roll the dice. Women at home have all this pressure from their girlfriends to land the big game, put their head on the wall. Naturally, they don't want to marry every eligible man they meet, but they are determined to make us act like we want to and parade us around to their family and friends and make us change our clothing and hairstyle. Well, all the while, and if they were to be honest, they would have to admit it, that not only are they planning to dump us for various infractions as soon as our trophy tour is over, but they decided what the dumpable infractions were the night they met us. They entered the fray marvelously well armed. Women who are traveling have no audience for their trophies, and so they are like we are, ready to fuck and suck and make a pleasant night of it. He took a sip of beer. I forgot how easily distressed you are, Frankie, by such talk. Which is what you want to do, right? Distress me? Frank said, which stopped him for a moment. The thing that distresses me is how much more cynical you've become. Yeah, Dmitry said, right. He stretched the word out so it sounded like a version of riot. You getting laid at all, Frankie? I suspect not. You don't want to get pulled around by your nose ring by a flock of vile hens either, I assume, not to mix my barnyard metaphors. Thus, if you want to get some trim, a laudable American addition to the idiom, becoming more appropriate every day as shaving and waxing conquers the last outposts of territory formerly haired. The only way to get it is to buy it, which is where I began. It's expensive, and you're even tighter than I am. So I can't imagine you dropping a couple $100 a couple $100 a bang on a regular basis. Then you dress this frugality up as moral reprehension. You ought to take a little trip on the tortoise one day. It'd do you good. Frank had busied himself putting together some dinner from the fridge and chose to ignore this, knowing Dmitry would start off on something else right away, which he did. Frank let him monologue his way into the night, and they managed to avoid any tricky subjects, because what would be the point? Dmitry had changed his major from physical therapy, yes, Frank thought, funny, to business, and transferred to another university Frank had never heard of, and reported himself to be quite a success. The thing about university, Frankie, is that basically you only have a couple of elementary chores in each of your courses. The first is to make your professors feel fantastically smart. And the second is to make them think you want to be exactly like them. Most students think you parrot back whatever they say, but since the professors are flattered like this every day, they're jaded, and their higher vanity makes them look for proof that they have taught you not just what to think, but how to think. A stupendously high standard, really. How can they all do that? 3 or 4 or 5 of them a term. So you pretend to vigorously disagree with some minor point they've made while ceding all the major ones slavishly. Your apparent struggle and error, which you let them correct, convince them they're having an effect. Then you hint you want to do research in field X, because whatever their vanity about teaching, their narcissism about their research is massively stronger. Most of them will explain that you need decades of training before daring to attempt the awesome and intricate feats they manage, which is perfect since your path is greased forever by the offer and you didn't want to do the research anyway. They tell you to write a term paper that would be nothing more than a summary of their latest white paper, but they never remember what they told you to do 3 or 4 months later, so you hand them anything. I've given the same research project to every one of my business professors, simply inserting new recent data each time, so they never suspect it's an updated version of the one from the preceding term. That's god-awful, Dmitry, Frank said, having slowly heated. Imagine what that sounds like to me. I'd love to go to university. I'd love to have that kind of chance, and you're just fucking off, cheating your way through. Christ, what a waste. Don't you care at all? Don't you want to learn anything? Whoa, Frankie boy, what a torrent from you. If I remember correctly, you yourself remember not a single thing from your wantonly brief time at university. It turns out Frank did actually go to college briefly, but he was smoking a lot of pot and he forgot he was going. So he was taking a couple of courses and he failed them both. So this seemed to Frank a low blow. That aside, you needn't worry. I do want to learn, and the research I show them is research I'm actually doing, building data in an always evolving and actually quite useful project, unlike most of theirs. I'm learning the Asian markets. I've decided it would be a gigantic error to settle for being a capitalist pig when I can, with not an iota's more effort, be an imperialist pig. Faulkner said Hartford teaches you how to drown yourself, and Sewanee doesn't even teach you what water is, Frank thought. And so who knows? Maybe British universities teach smart-ass nihilism. They managed not to talk about the motorhome disaster or about the debacle with Margie or his pimping in Connecticut or his other crimes, not that time or the next. Frank knew, after a while, what Dmitry would say if he ever did confront him with those crimes. Risk, as he put it much later, apropos of something else, after he had made his first fortune. Risk is the essence of our world, Frankie. And his risking of lives certainly didn't end that summer. Far from it. Risk, he said with that fucking grin, makes the world go round. Among the lives he risked, eventually, was Frank's.
That was so fun.
Hi,
listening
Steph.
to you read. Hey, it's funny. We just had this conversation for crime reads about kind of the nature of noir, and we'll get into that a little bit later. But you said you started off the conversation by noting that it was hard to know who had seniority, because in some ways. I mean, obviously, you've been consuming noir for much longer than I have. You're also kind of my boss.
Kind of your boss, and who's got seniority? I mean, it's not that hard a question. I mean, look at my hair.
But
yeah,
this is your first novel. You're a debut novelist.
I am a debut novelist, and you have 4.
Yeah,
3 of them are noir novels.
I've been doing this for, I guess, 7 years now, so I have a little seniority there.
Oh, well, in that case, I have seniority because I've been doing it for about 50. I just finally finished it.
Yeah, no, so that's what I wanted to ask you, because you've published several books. you've been writing professionally for years and years. And so I wanted to ask you, when you started this novel, was it your first crack at a novel? And can you talk a little bit about, why now, why this book?
Yeah, it's far from the first crack. The first attempt at a novel was very much like Frank's attempt to go to college. I was kind of pretty stoned, and I forgot I was writing it. No, I did not get very far. I did think that I was a novelist. I mean, I wanted to be a novelist. I was planning to be a novelist, and I hadn't quite worked out the sitting down and writing part of it. I felt like I was taking care of all of the other parts. I was hopping trains, and I was doing the stuff that I thought novelists did. I was doing, my drugs and my life, my wild life. But I never got around to it. And then I got a job at one point. I was cooking breakfast and lunch. I was in my late 20s. I already had a kid or two. And I got a job cooking breakfast and lunch at a college. And the college offered to let me go to school there for free. They were just looking for warm bodies to stick Pell Grants on, stay alive. And so I started going to college at 28 or so. And I realized that there are these people called professors, and they read books for a living. And I thought, okay, I have found my calling, and I kind of stayed right through. I went right through the PhD, and that PhD route took me away from the novel in a couple of ways. When I was in college, I was writing a few short stories and publishing them in the University of Massachusetts literary magazine. Still planning to be a novelist, but then you study for a literature PhD. It means you read 1 million books. And they're all better than you, is what it feels like, right? And so I have, Toni Morrison sitting on this shoulder and Henry James on that shoulder, and they're laughing at me when I sit down to write a novel. So that slowed me down, and I also, needed to write, publish or perish. I needed to write my other books. I needed to write the books that I was getting paid to write as a literature professor. So I wrote those first. And then I got the job at UC Riverside in the creative writing department, which meant that I could write whatever I wanted. And then I started writing the novel in earnest. So that's still 10 years ago.
Was this the novel that you started writing then?
This is the novel I started writing then.
So did it? So when did you finish the first draft of it?
7 years ago, 5 years ago. I don't know. Long time. Because I changed it from third person to first person to third person to first person to third person, and then almost half the book takes place in the first year of the story, and so the way it was shaped, it seemed very misshapen, and I kept trying to push what was happening later further forward, and that wasn't working. So I chopped it all up and put, I have a chapter in 2000, then a chapter in 2002, chapter in 2000, 2004, 2000, 2006, 2000, 2007. And I just kind of kept chopping it all up and doing that. And for some reason that seemed choppy. So I kind of mushed some of them back together, but ended up with a non-chronological version of it, and then changed it back to third person the last time, and then it started to feel like the right shape. And
so you spent more time editing this than you did drafting it.
Oh yeah,
sounds like.
Yeah.
So I guess it was the primary thing that you went back and forth on, the perspective. It was originally close third with both Dmitry and Frank, or how did you?
I really love Elmore Leonard and Carl Hyacin and the kind of comic noir, and Mark Haskell Smith, our local practitioner in that genre, and they use this 3 plot structure, where you follow one character or characters, and then you get another set, and you get another set, and you just go chapter, 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 and then they all come together at the end. And that was what I thought I was going to do. Most of that draft is just gone. Just doesn't exist anymore. So there was some real trash can versions.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think I always get precious about throwing stuff away, but I guess sometimes it's necessary because it's a pretty spare novel. Like, I think you whittled it down and got to the core of it.
Thank you.
Is there any part of it that you parted with that you wish you hadn't, or that you want to keep for like another project, like the work that you put into it?
No. No. There's nothing that I threw out that was worth keeping. But I am not sure I'm through with these folks. Mm-hmm. I think maybe still Slippy. I might get to at some point.
So what was the first piece of this book that came to you?
It was one of Dmitry's monologues.
Okay, I would have guessed Dmitry.
Yeah.
Just having read the book and even hearing you read him, because he's kind of this voice that carries the book. I mean, he reminds me a lot of like a Harry Lime kind of character. Yeah. I mean, I think for explicit reasons. Mm-hmm.
Because he quotes him several times, among other things. Yeah.
But even before, I think when I was reading the book, I felt like that was there was something of that dynamic that went into this friendship, and then I think once he started quoting Harry Lime, I was like, yes, this is it. Yeah. Which is part of the pleasure of the novel too, as somebody who is a fan of the genre. So let's talk a little bit about Dmitry.
Okay, one quick thing about Third Man though, about Harry Lime. I did an interview in New York the other day with the guy is Tobias Carroll. Have you run into him? Volume 1 Brooklyn. He asked me about the literary references in the book, and I said that it was your novel, your first novel, Follow Her Home, which your accidental detective is a Raymond Chandler nut, right? I mean, she's obsessed with Raymond Chandler, and that idea really kind of freed me up. Reading that and thinking, I don't have to be afraid of the kind of anxiety of influence. I don't have to be afraid of these other writers. I can let them in. Yeah. So.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah. Yeah. No, because we actually met because you read my first book. Mm-hmm. And that was in 2013, and nobody read that book, so I was very appreciative. And then you gave me a job. But yeah, I wanted to talk about Dmitry because I think his voice, I could see that being kind of the first thing that pops into your head. I mean, how much of his character kind of came with that voice, and did you always envision him as this kind of anti-hero, villain, rapacious imperialist pig, or did that kind of come later?
It came pretty fast, if it wasn't already there. It came pretty fast. There's how Twain, he tells some story at a dinner party, and somebody says to him, God, that's a great story. And he said, yeah, I know. It gets better every time I tell it. Right? And there's a way in which there are some real life models, real life people that turned into literary characters. But by the time you've rewritten them 100 times, they become very, very different people. Dmitry's voice was the voice of somebody who talked to me in a very similar way. Just get told a long story, and I thought, okay, that's a character, and I started writing from that person. So with that as the base, it kind of thinking what happens to an absolutely amoral person in this world. Well, they become president, right? I mean, they become the people who don't mind killing people to make money. They're the kind of people that don't mind destroying the planet to make money. They don't mind destroying anybody at any moment for any reason. So I was sure that the only reason to kind of, I think there's something very fun and funny about Dmitry, right?
Yeah, he's very charming. He reminds me of a certain kind of person that I run into once in a while, where you kind of think, how's this person getting away with like everything that he's saying? And it's usually a man, and he's usually funny. And then you step back for a second. It happens once in a while where I'll be like describing a person to my husband, and he'll be like, why did you hang out with this person? He sounds like a terrible person. And then it's just kind of like, oh, like, when you're actually like in the room with him, he like is very, and then you realize, oh yeah, this is a terrible person. But like there's a charm that makes him worth spending time with. I think if he weren't charming, it'd be very difficult to read.
Yes.
To read his voice and to read his monologues, but that charm is a key piece of his character. And actually, I was curious, even hearing you read just now. You're a decent, reasonable, upstanding person, and you have apparently spent 10 years of your life writing in this man's voice, and I'm guessing having a lot of fucking fun doing it.
Yes.
I wonder when you're writing Dmitry, is there like a delight in kind of embracing like the worst version of like your thoughts, or like the thoughts that like that you can imagine, and like getting that on paper?
Yeah, and I think that that's part of the delight, hopefully, that an audience has, right? We love our sociopaths. We love, Tony Soprano, Walter White, all of them. We just love them. We love to watch them do whatever they want, whenever they want, however they want, right? So there's a pleasure in letting it go, and also a kind of pleasure in feeling like. Feeling our distance from them at the same time. So Frank allows me to feel the distance at the same time too.
And yet Frank is completely compromised by this person and their relationship. It's an interesting dynamic too, because it starts as this not exactly a mentor-mentee relationship, but Frank is older, and he's the one who has hired Dmitry, and he's this older family friend. He's friends with his parents, and so there's it seems like there would be this dynamic where he is taking this young 18-year-old man under his wing, and yet the power dynamic becomes inverted very quickly, and he becomes completely swept away by this 18-year-old who, and they maintain this friendship over many years. And one of the things that I find interesting about Frank as a character is they keep meeting. Every time they meet, Dmitry is wealthier, he has done more amoral things, and he kind of reports on them. And like Frank doesn't really call him out on it, except in kind of like a nudgy way, right. And he is deeply disturbed by him, but there's a part of him that is jealous of him, that admires him, and you start, one of the things I wondered, because we're in Frank's point of view, is how his life path has been formed by this person, and if he's even, and to what extent he's even aware of that. Like if he hadn't met this 18-year-old, like would he have made different life choices? He's somebody who has a lot of trouble with relationships, for example, and he's somebody who through his own work ethic, but like he also becomes very wealthy.
Yeah, I think that what I finally decided was worth paying attention to, right? Because they're little people, right? That I've made, right? So they contain multitudes, but the things that I thought were worth paying attention to with them were how does everyday misogyny get kind of recreated in its next avatar? And one of the ways it does is through models like Dmitry or Tony Soprano, through these kind of absolutely amoral, selfish people who maintain a kind of sense of why it's okay to be that way, right? Or give a model for how to be that way. So that's one thing worth paying attention to. I thought it was worth paying attention to in their dynamic. The other was how does a person who is himself very, at some point, pretty wealthy, continue to consider himself completely other than the 0.1 percenters like Dmitry, and Dmitry at some point points this out to him. Right, it's a way in which relative wealth in a vastly elongated wealth structure justifies all the behaviors below it. Right, and something about sociopathic behavior that can justify for people all of the behaviors that are less sociopathic.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. No, I mean, actually, when you're reading that line stuck out at me. Why be a capitalist pig when you can be an imperialist pig? Because those are different levels, and I think Frank has Dmitry as this. He's just this really salient person in his life who, when that's somebody who you can always compare yourself against, you're always going to come out looking pretty good. It must be really fun not to have a conscience, actually.
Yes, right, exactly.
To have no conscience and all the money in the world, that must be really fun. But yeah, can you talk about that the capitalist pig, imperialist pig, kind of that differential? I mean, I enjoyed the bringing in of like the Asian markets, and also talk about how that ties into crime and noir for you. The kind of line between just talking about capitalism and talking about crime.
Well, from the earliest days of noir, right, Red Harvest. I mean, from the earliest days of noir, the kind of question of capitalism was at the forefront.
Third Man is what that's.
And the Third Man, the perfect example. Yeah. So it seems to me to be just very much in the tradition in that sense. I mean, you have people that cut people up in dungeons and.
I don't have dungeons. I don't think I do dungeons.
Where is that? Where is that secret room where the guy is cutting people up? So you have some sociopaths. I think that what I wanted in this case was a sociopath who was very ordinary.
Yeah, he's not like a serial killer.
He's not like a serial killer. No. I mean, although.
Yeah, but yeah. He's not. But he's not like in it for the sadism.
No.
He's just callous.
Yeah.
And he's able to steamroll people with his wealth and in pursuit of more wealth and power and women. Which, at some point, what's the distinction? Like, why does it matter what part of it he's getting pleasure from?
Yes, right.
But yeah, I really enjoyed that piece of it. And also, I noticed that this book is one that incorporates your love of travel. I actually have very little understanding of like world markets and all this kind of arcane stuff that Dmitry gets into. Was that kind of a natural outcropping of like wanting to write about other countries, or I really enjoyed kind of the variety of settings in this book.
Yeah, I mean, it is part of my travel. I mean, it's part of travel. One of the things I ended up reading for the Slacker book were the letters that John Adams wrote about his travels in Europe, and they were all about the kind of financial structures of the factories that he was looking at and how they were working. How they were supporting themselves with debt financing and all this. It was very. It's if you travel a lot, one of the things you're going to notice these days is the Chinese everywhere, for instance, right? Chinese industry everywhere, Chinese corporations, Chinese outposts in almost every country in the world, and when you travel in a lot of very poor countries, as I have, it's impossible not to see their place in the scheme of things, and the way that their place in the scheme of things is going to be very, very hard to change. So yeah, it's part of my sense of the kind of relationship between everyday labor and the financialization of markets, and the fact that the financialization of markets is where the money is and not the everyday labor, is something that gets reinforced every place I go.
The kind of dynamic that Dmitry is somebody who has a certain kind of relationship with women, including his wife, who's an Asian woman, and he has a relationship with the East and with money that all kind of fits under the rubric of like Orientalism, actually. Just in the sense of Orientalism as this idea of like this feminized other, and it all kind of aligns perfectly, and it in a way that also fits with the noir tradition of the femme fatale.
Yep.
So I wanted to ask you about, kind of his relationship with women and Dmitry's relationship with women, and how you kind of tangled with the tropes, the tropes of gender dynamics in the genre, which are deeply ingrained.
Yeah, well, I hope in a lot of different ways. One is I was very interested in foregrounding the kind of homoerotics of the noir tradition, and you can't love Chandler without loving that part of Chandler too, right? And foregrounding how women function in male, bisexual anyway, eroticism. And so that was part of it. The fact that I guess isn't giving too much away, but Frank falls in love with Dmitry's wife.
I think you mentioned that early on.
I did.
Yeah,
okay.
I think
He falls in love with Dmitry's wife, and René Girard has this thing about his basic theory of life is that we're apes, we're primates. We ape each other, we mimic each other, we imitate each other. That's how we learn. That's how we decide what to wear. That's decide what we're going to do. And that is all fine and good. It all works fine until we start to imitate each other's desires. And once we imitate each other's desire for the same object, that's where conflict comes from. So that's the basic Girardian theory of violence. And so this kind of imitation of Dmitry's desires on Frank's part leads him to the one really obvious conclusion: is he's going to imitate his desire for his own wife. And so Frank is completely 100%. He's got. I love to give him a little bit of awareness, so that the novel doesn't feel too claustrophobic, right? And like give him a little bit of the awareness that my readers, I think, are always ahead of him.
Yeah,
right?
Just a little bit,
right? And so, but the one thing that he's absolutely unaware of is that his idea that he's going to rescue Yuli, Dmitry's wife, from this life with the swine, is the Orientalist patriarchal fantasy par excellence, right?
Yeah,
right?
And he doesn't, and he also doesn't understand why he's in love with her either.
No,
he credits, it's just the thunderbolt, pretty much.
Yes,
when
right.
It's clearly about wanting to wear this man's skin in a way.
Yeah, exactly. And so and what I tried to I've got I think some interesting setups for that. There's a moment where they're in a strip club, little kind of tiny, seedy local strip club, and Frank is already having a kind of rescue fantasy for one of the women that's dancing there, and this is kind of part of this is part of the kind of culture of sex and gender that has already made Frank what he is. It's a continuation of it, not a new, out of the blue moment.
So you said you were thinking about spending more time with these characters. Have you already started writing a sequel, or are you interested in doing one? And what would that look like, without giving away, I guess, what happens in this one?
I think that Yuli would be a huge part of it. Maybe the biggest part of it, but I haven't quite figured that out yet. Because I think that she's a really interesting character who's written in this novel. She's written almost in like Rachel Cusk's outline. She's almost written in outline, right? Because the people who are talking about her have no idea who she is really, and we as readers, I think, get a sense that this is a woman who is very different from the way she's being represented by the men that are talking about her, and so. We get that a little bit, but it's very, very much at the end, and so I thought it'd be fun to kind of just really work with her now.
We can keep talking, but I figured I'd give people a chance to ask questions.
Sorry about the accent again.
Well, I was going to ask about it. What I wanted to know is why, when this voice of this slippy, amoral, narcissistic charmer comes into your head, it comes with a British accent.
The original did.
Yeah.
The original guy who is the actual real life person who first gave me one of these stories. He was British.
Does that guy know about this book?
Yeah.
Are you still friends?
It's brilliant, Tommy.
Does he have that strain of amorality, or just the charm?
Yeah. Well, I mean, okay, he's of course morphed, and he's not exactly the same person, but he's morphed quite a bit. He's now from Liverpool. He was actually from Bristol. No, he's morphed in other ways as well. But yeah, it was an actual person, and I was fascinated by him.
Because slippy is a very British word.
Yeah, that was not my idea. The novel is originally named Sugarfish.
Oh.
And I can see from the various people going, that's why nobody seemed to like that title. So so it's a British publisher, Repeater Books in London, and he hated Sugarfish and said, I think you should call it Born Slippy. I didn't know what Born Slippy was.
So you put the song in after?
Yeah, I put the song in after he changed the title. So the song is kind of salted through the novel, but that was after he gave me the new title.
Sugarfish, like the sushi restaurant.
The sushi, yeah.
Named for the sushi restaurant?
Yeah, it was a complete like MacGuffin. It was a red herring. It was just that they're standing. They need a password for an account, and he looks up and he says Sugarfish. So I like the idea that there was absolutely no reason for it to be the title, except for that one moment. Nobody else liked that idea either. So, BJ, you didn't like it either, did you? I was just saying you didn't. Oh, you did like Sugarfish. Okay, good.
Why Western Mass of all places? Is it just because you spend time there? It's
Yeah.
just an odd.
Just because I spent time there. Yeah. Yeah, so it's a place I knew. The place in Connecticut is a place I knew. Basically, every place in the novel are based on places that I know fairly well, except for Jakarta. A fair amount of it takes place in Jakarta, and I've never been in Jakarta. And I think that for that reason, the Jakarta scenes are more convincing. I'm not confused by what I'm saying and not saying. I'm just
Is that
making a picture.
is that where the house is?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Because I was actually curious if that was a real place, because that place was one of the more vivid settings for me. They like huge kind
Right?
of white house
Yeah,
that were
exactly.
there's like a wall all the way on that side.
No, that's completely made up.
Huh.
Yeah. So. Jeff. Oh yeah. Oh, I love me my Ripley. Yeah. We have a cat named Ripley.
That's a great
Yeah.
cat name. You can't name a dog Ripley.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. No. Yeah. Highsmith is high on my list because I love. Again, a great sociopath, right? I mean, this is a guy who is so much fun to spend time with, and not many worse people, right? So, yeah.
It's interesting because I feel like I see in some ways more of Ripley in Frank than in Dmitry.
Interesting. He should start killing people maybe in the next one.
Did the original Dmitry,
Mm-hmm.
his name I assume wasn't Dmitry, did he have the same energy that your Dmitry has, or was this something you had to tune? There's all those sociopaths and crazy, damaging people I've known. The one thing that I couldn't imagine being able to fake is their enormous energy.
Well, I think that when he's talking, and I guess, when I'm reading it, he sounds a little energetic, but he's also very slow. At one point in the novel, he takes up Brazilian jiu-jitsu because even though he's got, his European mistress and his Asian mistress and his establishments and his adventures in Saigon and the weekends and that kind of thing, he still not seem to have enough physical contact, so he starts wrestling on mats with men a few days a week, his wrestling style is like his construction style, which is that he's very slow. He just moves very slow. It's very deliberate, very slow. Nothing energetic about it, and. Dmitry says he was, complains about how slow he is, and he said, "Yes, Frankie, I had no ambitions in the building trades. I'm afraid it showed." So he's like really just very, very kind of lumbering bearish in some ways as well. So I try to keep both of those things there. A kind of lumbering bear who talks a mile a minute. No. Is that what this guy was? Not so much. Those are. I think both parts of that are exaggerated, and various things about him have been attenuated. And yeah, he's become, as you know, you write fiction. These people, they just surprise you, don't they?
Are there other questions?
Running an Instagram account as part of a marketing strategy for it, I think, is the worst part of it. I mean, seriously, the writing is, and especially writing fiction, is just pure pleasure. There's nothing more fun in the world of writing than writing fiction. So, I had a blast writing this thing. I just start to finish, and the editing stuff as well. Even in the editing, like all of a sudden somebody would say something, and I really felt like they had said something funny that surprised me, and so that I find it just pure pleasure. The hard stuff is really just kind of worrying about publishing it and all of that, everything that comes after. But the process itself, I just love.
Do you think you'll keep writing crime fiction and noir?
Yeah. I have started another one, which is a kind of mass incarceration novel. It's not as much fun.
Yeah, it doesn't sound.
No, it's a more serious book, and And so I'm not sure I'm going to be able to stick with it. I think I need the fun part. So I've started that, and so that of course is crime fiction as well. It's a thriller with a mass incarceration backdrop. It's a prison industry thriller. And
Capitalism and crime.
yeah, exactly. So I want to do another one like this. This was the most fun. We'll see. I've written a book since this that I think is also fun. That's called Aimlessness: An Introduction, which is a short philosophy book that's coming out this year.
Oh,
And,
you have a 2-book year.
Yeah, as it turns out, yeah, kind of beginning and end, but yeah, and then I'm finishing up the 3rd volume in the travel series. So that I've been working on those 2 more than the next novel.
Okay.
But I can't wait to get back to it.
Can you talk more about that editing process? Like it took you these 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
I know you talked about like just even choosing between the perspective of first person and first third. But what are some other things that happened in that time frame in the relationship with the book?
In the relationship with the book, yeah, my theory of life is that productive procrastination is the way to the successful life. So what I do most of the time is play hooky on the book that I'm supposed to be writing by writing another book, and so. During those 5 years that I was rewriting it, I wrote two other books. I wrote and published 2 other books. So a lot of the time, what would happen was I would think, okay, well, that was fun, but it's kind of a mess. It's not really a book yet. Maybe I should fix it. On the other hand, I could work on this book and I just go and do that for a while. So a lot of what happens is that you're away from it, and getting away from it, as we know, that whole thing, put it in a drawer for a few months. That, if you have the luxury of being able to do that, that is a great thing for letting structures emerge that you were not entirely clear about. So rereading the thing after you've been away from it for a while, you think, oh, well, that's what's wrong with it. Yeah. There's got to be more than one character. Things like that. You learn what's wrong, and can go back in, and be kind of refreshed and like re-meet these characters and think, oh, that's interesting. Well, I don't think actually this one would say that to that one anymore. Now that I think about it. At the time, I had to have them say something, and I hadn't thought it through, so they just say something and we move on. But now I realize that character would never say that, and so you kind of different people start to emerge in the text and that kind of thing. So but the kind of, I often think about it. I grew up on the East Coast, and so one of the things I had to do as a kid was shovel snow. Off the driveway. And there's this thing where you kind of push a snow shovel down the driveway. My Canadian friend is laughing, like, you don't know about shoveling snow. Push the shovel down the driveway, and it kind of piles up in front of it, and then you can't push it anymore because it's just too big and too heavy. So you have to kind of get in there and dig it, throw it out, and then you can start pushing down the driveway again. And eventually you can push everything down the driveway at once. And that's, I think of writing it like that. Like you're pushing everything ahead, and then you end up with a big pile up. And then you have to get rid of the pile up and get some smooth pushing again. I don't know if that makes any sense, but. It was partly deciding that I was going to write a genre novel, and that I was not going to swing for the fences. I was not going to go for literary immortality. I was going to write a genre novel because people do that. And some people wrote 3 of them a year, 30 times in a row, right? And ended up with 100 of them. So I can do this. And Henry James couldn't do that. He could only write a novel a year. So it was mostly the genre decision that freed it up. And also, it's funny. When you read as a literature professor, you tend to read good books. You read a lot of good books. When you're reading as a book review editor, you end up reading a mixture of books. And so at some point you can look at one and you can think, this is getting a lot of attention. People seem to think this is a good book. I can't be Toni Morrison, but I can do this. So that was part of it freeing up too. One more. Yes. Oh yeah. Yeah. Yes. And to friends and to my agent and but the friends first. And that's it's a barter economy. I'm the first reader for a few people and I have a few people who are my first readers, and so they read it. When my wife read it and said, "You did it," I thought, okay, let's go get an agent. So yeah, Laurie and I are each other's first readers for most things. How much is it? Is there a truth to the beginning? There's truth on every single page. And we can't really have a full discussion on realism in literature, right? But the almost every character in the book has a real life origin of some kind. So in some cases, there's this character, and when I read in New York, a friend of mine from high school came out and he said, "I know who that guy is," and it was half of him was a guy I went to high school with, and the other half is one of my first readers actually. So it was a little melange of those two people, and the settings and the relationships are all have some relation to an actual person and an actual set of events. But they're all mixed up and mixed together, and kind of like more like a smoothie than a police report.
Any last questions? Okay, well, this is great. This is a pleasure to do, and there are books for purchase, and Tom will be signing. And
thank you, Steph Cha, for everything that you do and for this. And thank you all for coming out. This is really it's a dream. Thank you so much.
Congratulations.
You've been listening to the Skylight Books author reading series. Don't forget, you can listen to this and all of our other great podcasts at skylightbooks.com. Thanks again for stopping by, and we hope to see you soon.